The security camera footage showed it all, a solitary figure standing at the edge of the penthouse balcony, 68 floors above Manhattan, arms outstretched as if embracing the void. For 3 minutes and 27 seconds, Maxwell Reed, the man worth $47 billion, contemplated stepping off. What happened in the months that followed would change not just his life, but thousands of others. If you're wondering whether money truly buys happiness, this story might just break your heart, and then rebuild it in ways you never expected. Before we dive deeper into Maxwell's journey, if you're finding value in stories that explore the human condition beneath wealth and status, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful human stories that often go untold. Maxwell Reed had everything money could buy and nothing that truly mattered. At 52, he'd built Reed Tech from a garage startup into a global empire. Business magazines called him the Oracle of Silicon Valley. His face appeared on the covers of Fortune, Forbes, and Time. His name topped donor lists at prestigious universities and hospitals. Yet each night, he returned to his 12,000-square-foot penthouse where the only sound was the hum of the climate control system maintaining a perfect 72 degrees. That night on the balcony wasn't his first brush with the void. Depression had been Maxwell's silent companion for decades, masked by achievement and acquisition. The public saw the billionaire with the Midas touch. They didn't see the man who hadn't felt genuine human connection since his wife Claire died 15 years earlier. They didn't see how he'd stopped tasting food, how colors had gradually leached from his world, or how he sometimes went days without speaking to another human being outside of business contexts. "I had everything and nothing," Maxwell would later confess in a rare interview. "I owned 6 homes I never visited. I had a garage full of cars I never drove. I could buy anything, go anywhere, meet anyone, and none of it mattered. I'd become a ghost haunting my own life." The morning after the balcony incident, Maxwell's executive assistant Eliza found him sitting in his home office, staring at nothing. She'd worked for him for 8 years and had never seen him miss a meeting. When she reminded him of his 9 a.m. board call, he looked at her with vacant eyes and said, "What's the point?" Those 3 words terrified her. Maxwell Reed never questioned purpose. He created it, defined it, pursued it relentlessly. Eliza canceled his meetings for the day, then the week. The business world buzzed with speculation. Reed Tech stock dipped 3% on rumors of the founder's health problems. What happened next surprised everyone, most of all Maxwell himself. While scrolling mindlessly through news on his tablet, he came across a local story about a community center in the Bronx facing closure. The center provided after-school programs, meals, and support services for hundreds of children and families. A small photo showed children gathered around a worn table, faces bright with concentration as they worked on homework. Something about their expressions pierced the fog around Maxwell's heart. Without analyzing why, he made a call to his foundation director. "Find out what they need to stay open. Make it happen. And don't put my name on it." 2 days later, Maxwell received a handwritten thank you note from the center's director, Elena Vasquez. Unlike the polished gratitude he usually received from beneficiaries, this was raw and real. "You didn't just save a building," she wrote. "You saved a lifeline for 347 children who have nowhere else to go. If you ever want to see what your money actually does, our doors are always open to you." Maxwell stared at the invitation for a long time. He hadn't entered a building without security clearance, advanced teams, and carefully orchestrated movements in over a decade. The thought terrified and intrigued him. 3 days later, wearing jeans and a plain sweater, clothes his stylist had to specially purchase because he owned nothing so ordinary, Maxwell took a taxi to the Bronx. No driver, no security detail. Just a man in nondescript clothes stepping into a world he'd forgotten existed. The center was nothing like the gleaming institutions that usually bore donor names. The building was old, the paint faded, the furniture mismatched. But it hummed with life. Children raced through hallways. Teenagers huddled over computers. Volunteers distributed meals. No one recognized the billionaire standing awkwardly in the entrance. Elena spotted him first. Unlike most people who met Maxwell, she didn't seem intimidated. "You came," she said simply, extending her hand. "Thank you for that. Would you like a tour, or did you just come to check on your investment?" "A tour," Maxwell said, his voice rusty from disuse. "Please." What was meant to be a brief visit stretched to 3 hours. Maxwell met children who spoke of futures as doctors, artists, engineers, dreams that reminded him of his own childhood ambitions before money became his measuring stick. He sat in on a coding class where teenagers were creating apps to solve community problems. He ate a simple meal in the cafeteria, surrounded by the chaos and laughter of families. "You're quiet," Elena observed as they walked through the center's small garden, maintained by the seniors program. "Is it what you expected?" "I don't know what I expected," Maxwell admitted. "It's been a long time since I've been anywhere real." Elena studied him with perceptive eyes. "Money builds impressive walls, doesn't it? Both the ones you want and the ones you don't." Something about her directness broke through Maxwell's carefully constructed facade. "I don't know how to live in the world anymore," he confessed. "I've forgotten how to be a person instead of a portfolio." "Then maybe it's time to remember," Elena said. "We need volunteers for the homework program on Tuesdays and Thursdays. No special skills required, just patience and presence." Maxwell almost laughed at the absurdity, a billionaire volunteering to help children with homework when he could simply write a check to hire professional tutors. Yet something about the simplicity of the offer appealed to him. "I'd probably be terrible at it." "Probably," Elena agreed with a smile. "Most people are at first. But you learn." To the shock of his executive team, Maxwell rearranged his schedule to free up Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. His security detail was horrified when he insisted on taking the subway. His board members whispered about mental breakdowns and midlife crises. But for the first time in years, Maxwell felt a flicker of something that resembled purpose. His first day as a volunteer was a disaster. The children were either intimidated by him or completely unimpressed. He struggled to explain basic math concepts he understood at a theoretical level but couldn't translate to a 10-year-old's comprehension. He went home exhausted and oddly exhilarated. "I failed completely," he told Elena the following week. "But I'd like to try again." "That's all anyone can ask," she said. Gradually, awkwardly, Maxwell learned to connect. He discovered that Xavier, a quiet 12-year-old, had an extraordinary mind for engineering but no access to materials. He learned that Lucia, who struggled with reading, could tell stories that captivated everyone when given the chance to speak instead of write. He discovered that Damon, who rarely completed homework, was caring for younger siblings while his mother worked night shifts. For the first time in decades, Maxwell was solving problems that money alone couldn't fix. He needed patience, creativity, and genuine human connection. He needed to listen more than speak, learn more than teach. 6 months into his volunteer work, Maxwell made another decision that shocked the business world. He announced he was stepping down as CEO of ReadTech to focus on community investment initiatives. Wall Street analysts predicted disaster. His board threatened revolt. But Maxwell had discovered something more valuable than stock options. He'd found purpose beyond profit. Working with Elena and community leaders, Maxwell created a new model for his philanthropy. Instead of top-down giving, he established neighborhood-based decision councils where residents determined priorities for investment. Rather than imposing solutions, he provided resources for communities to implement their own. The problem with traditional philanthropy, Maxwell explained in a rare public speech, is that it often preserves the very power dynamics it claims to address. We give from above, reinforcing the narrative that solutions come from wealth rather than wisdom. The communities I've worked with have more expertise about their needs than I could ever acquire. Not everyone applauded this approach. Critics called it naive. Fellow billionaires questioned his judgment. But in community centers, schools, and neighborhoods across the city, something remarkable was happening. Programs designed by residents were showing unprecedented success rates. Young people were finding pathways to education and employment. Families were stabilizing. And Maxwell Reed was learning to live again. The transformation wasn't instant or easy. Depression doesn't vanish with purpose, and decades of isolation aren't undone by months of connection. Maxwell still had dark days when he questioned everything. But now, when the darkness descended, he wasn't alone. There was Elena, who never treated him as anything but a man trying to find his way. There were the children at the center who depended on his presence, not his money. There was a growing network of community leaders who challenged his thinking and expanded his understanding. 2 years after that night on the balcony, Maxwell made another decision that stunned the financial world. He announced he was giving away 90% of his fortune during his lifetime, but with an unprecedented approach. Communities would receive direct endowments with decision-making power over the funds. Traditional philanthropic gatekeepers were removed from the equation. This isn't charity, Maxwell insisted when questioned about the model. It's redistribution of resources to the people who know best how to use them. I'm not giving away my money, I'm returning wealth to the communities from which it was extracted. The initiative, called Community Wealth Collectives, spread across the country. Maxwell's example inspired other billionaires to reconsider their approaches to giving. Some followed his lead. Others doubled down on traditional philanthropy. The debate transformed the conversation about wealth, power, and who deserves a voice in shaping solutions. Through it all, Maxwell continued his Tuesday and Thursday afternoons at the original community center. He watched Xavier graduate high school and earn a full scholarship to MIT. He attended Lucia's first public storytelling performance. He helped Damon's family secure stable housing and childcare. The irony isn't lost on me, Maxwell reflected in his journal. I spent decades accumulating wealth to feel secure, only to discover that real security comes from connection. I built walls with my money, then had to learn that true safety exists in community. 3 years after that night on the balcony, Maxwell Reed no longer appeared on lists of the world's richest people. His net worth had dropped below the billion-dollar threshold as he systematically transferred wealth to community foundations. Business publications wrote about his fall from financial prominence. But in neighborhoods across the country, a different story was being told, about the billionaire who remembered how to be human, about communities reclaiming their power to determine their own futures, about a man who discovered that the antidote to loneliness wasn't acquisition but connection. On the 5th anniversary of his first visit to the community center, Maxwell stood in the garden that had expanded to include a small urban farm providing fresh produce for the neighborhood. Elena joined him, their relationship having evolved from polite professional interaction to deep friendship. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Giving up the empire, the status, the power?" Maxwell considered the question seriously, as he'd learned to do with all of Elena's questions. "I regret the years I wasted believing that wealth could substitute for meaning. I regret the relationships I sacrificed for status. But this?" He gestured to the garden where community members of all ages worked together. "How could I regret finding my way back to humanity?" That evening, Maxwell returned to his home, no longer the cavernous penthouse, but a modest apartment within walking distance of the community center. The space contained only what he needed and what brought him joy: books, music, photographs of people who mattered to him, simple furniture where friends gathered regularly. As he stood on his small balcony, looking out at the neighborhood he'd come to love, Maxwell reflected on the journey from isolation to connection. The man who had once contemplated stepping into the void had instead stepped into community, and found there the purpose that billions could never buy. The security camera footage from that night years ago still existed somewhere in digital storage. But it no longer defined Maxwell Reed. What defined him now were the lives he touched, not through grand gestures of wealth, but through the simple, profound act of showing up, day after day, to do the work of being human. If this story moved you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. We believe in the power of stories to remind us what truly matters in life, not the accumulation of wealth or status, but the connections we forge and the difference we make in each other's lives. Join our community as we continue exploring the extraordinary journeys of ordinary people finding their way back to what matters most.